She made her UFC debut just a couple of weeks ago at UFC 210 in Buffalo, New York, April 8th to be exact. And it was an interesting one because not a lot of people knew about Pearl Gonzalez going into that fight. She, of course, fought Cynthia Calvillo. And I recall being at the media day on Wednesday, and right afterwards, Calvillo and Pearl were the fighters that were being talked about the most. If you looked at our social media numbers, they were getting like triple the amount of views that Weidman and Mousasi were getting. It was crazy. And then, of course, we know what happened on the Friday before the fight. New York, for just a few hours, pulled her from the fight. And then the UFC worked on it, and then she was back, and then she does the press conference. And unfortunately, things didn't work out for her in the fight itself. But she has a very interesting backstory and certainly another name to remember. So I wanted to have her on to talk about that debut and where she goes from here. I do believe she is joining us via the magic of Skype right now. There she is, Pearl Gonzalez on the screen. Pearl, how are you?
I'm amazing. Thank you, Ariel. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you for asking. Not a lot of people actually ask me how I'm doing, so I appreciate you doing that. It's great to have you on the show. So wow, there's a lot to talk about here, but let's start here. If I ask you, how would you describe your UFC debut, considering everything that happened? You come in, relatively unknown, and how it all unfolds. Do you have good memories, not so good memories? How do you look back on what happened just a few weeks back?
So the coming into it fight week was absolutely amazing. It was everything that I had ever dreamed of, as far as the media day, the way the UFC treated me. They were awesome. The fight itself was not ideal for me. I think I made a lot of mental mistakes, and therefore I did not get the decision that I wanted out of that. So that's tough to deal with. That's been hard on me for the last couple weeks, dealing with that. But other than that, overall, the experience was everything that I had ever dreamed it to be. It was absolutely amazing. It was so great. I'm so blessed to be here in this position and to be able to fight for the UFC. So
you mentioned the mental mistakes. Do you think the moment got to you, the bright lights, pay-per-view, all that stuff, was that a little too much?
I don't know if it was too much. I think that I felt great going into the octagon, but then Bruce Buffer, I was mesmerized.
He is mesmerizing.
But I think that moment I was just like, wow. And it was all like a wow moment for me. And before I knew it, the fight had started, and I kind of got lost in that moment. And so I don't know if it was too big for me. I think I underestimated how important that moment and those 15 minutes were in that moment. And so going against a very game opponent who did such an amazing job of capitalizing on that, I definitely did not show the performance that I have the ability to show.
And here we are, like 2.5 weeks later. Does that still eat you up inside? Are you over the loss, or will it take more time?
It does eat me up. I think that I have allowed myself and gone through it enough to forgive myself for it, to accept the reality, because the reality is that I lost 2 weeks ago, and I was beat at something that I think I do the best at. And so moving forward, I'm taking the emotion that I felt from that fight, from that loss, from that moment, and I'm putting that into my training, and I'm using that emotion that I never want to feel again as fuel. And I've been in this position many times in my life where I just feel like I've been beaten to the ground, and I always get back up, and I am always stronger. And so I'm going to utilize that experience, like worst case situation ever. That was what it felt like, a heartbreak. And I'm going to use that to just come back and be better and stronger and sharper.
Cynthia has been some kind of a revelation. I mean, we didn't know much about her before she debuted at 209. Now she's 2-0, 2 pay-per-view wins. Did you underestimate her? Was she better than you thought she was going to be?
No, I think that she just did a great job of capitalizing on the moment. She fought exactly how I thought she was going to. I just was not mentally present and able to do what I needed to do to win that fight.
Okay. So I really felt for you on the Friday, when I found out that you were off the fight, of course, but even when you were back on, and I remember being in that big media room, not a lot of people were there, but this was like a really long media room, and we were all there waiting to speak to John Jones, and then we're told that you're going to talk to us first. And it was just, this is very this is very unique. Fighters don't usually come and talk to us in a press conference setting 24 hours before their fight, let alone their debut. Considering the roller coaster of emotions that day presented to you, do you feel like any of that, and I'm not trying to set you up to make an excuse here, but that would be, very understandable. Do you feel like all that stuff that happened on Friday affected the way you fought in the fight on Saturday?
I think so. I think that mentally it kind of pulled me away from the task at hand, and the task at hand is always to win. And so, not that it at all is an excuse. It was a lot for me to kind of take in and to go through, like seeing my article or seeing the story on CNN, seeing you tweet it, like seeing all of these media outlets, pushing this out. And of course, I've got 1,000,001 phone calls coming in. So it was a lot to take in. I thought I did the best that I could to kind of put that to the side. But I realized today, after the outcome of the fight, that I could have done a lot more to stay focused and completely have that tunnel vision for that fight.
Easier said than done, though, after the fact, right? I mean, you're being swept into this whole thing, and it's crazy. Like, if you Google your name on Google News, the outlets that covered this story, and I can understand why, it's a very clickable thing. But I really felt for you in that moment, and I was very impressed with how you handled it, at least as far as what we were seeing and the way you were talking to the media. But internally, like, was that your idea? Did you want to come address it? Or did the UFC say, maybe this is, in your best interest to do so, just suck it up for 10 minutes and then it'll be over?
Yeah, the UFC asked me to go speak with the media, and I had no problem. I wanted to let the world know that, that I'm dealing with it and talk to the media. I didn't say anything on my social media and wanted to wait until the UFC had kind of taken care of everything. So that was my opportunity to kind of give my opinion on what was going on the internet and stuff.
Do you blame the New York Commission at all for how they handled this?
No, I think they were doing their job. I think at the end of the day, the lady, the head commissioner, was just doing what she thought was best. And did they look into it enough before they jumped the ball? No, but what can you do at the end of the day? There was nothing I can do about it. I don't blame them. I think that they did jump the gun, but we all do that at times in our life, I believe.
Yeah. Did you, like, while this was being brought to your attention for the first time, did you ask them why this wasn't brought to your attention maybe on the Tuesday of fight week or a week or so before the fight? Why on the Friday after you cut weight, made weight, all that stuff?
Yes, I did. I was sitting there. I was still kind of like out of it. I'm just getting water and rehydrating. And she's like, "You're not fighting." And I'm like, what? And I'm a little slow at the moment. And she's like, well, she told me the reasons why. And I'm like, I put this in my paperwork. Like, I don't understand why you're saying that today. And she was like, "There's nothing I can do." And I was just like, okay. And I kind of like ran out and went to talk to my coach. I was pretty emotional about it at that moment. And, I kind of just, I dealt with it. I think I ran out and I started telling my coach out loud. And I think that was where I made the mistake. I should not have ran out and like was crying and emotional and telling him, "I can't fight." They're saying I can't fight. I have breast-implants. And, so I had jumped the ball myself. I kind of overreacted in that moment in front of the public. And so it kind of like transpired and went everywhere from there.
Yeah. Although, who can blame you? It's a pretty drastic thing to hear and a crazy thing to hear after you just cut weight, made weight, and are essentially 36 hours away from your UFC debut. Do you understand why that would even be a rule? Like, do you feel after, I'm sure you've done some research now a little bit because you're probably a little, inquisitive as to why this would be in the rule book. Does that make sense to you? Do you feel like it could be a potential health risk to someone?
No.
Okay.
Before I got my procedure done, that was my biggest concern is can I do this as an athlete and as a competitive athlete that's in combat sports, being punched, kicked, elbowed, etc. And my doctor told me those things are stronger than you. Let me tell you, you can run those over with a car and nothing will happen. And I was like, oh, all right, right on. So they're all right. And I think that the commission that has that law, I've never seen that before. I've never heard that before. I think that they do need to kind of do some research. I know that they contacted my doctor in order to kind of resolve this. And so my doctor had to call. He was in the middle of surgery, came out of surgery and called like the New York General and the commission. Wow. And basically told them, this is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard.
Wow.
there's no reason for this for us to even have this conversation, and went about and told them, you know, how this is not a risk and stuff. So, and kind of shut down the New York commission right in between surgery. So I'm very grateful my doctor did that for me. But yeah, they are safe. I did that research before I got the procedure done. Is it a silly rule? Absolutely. I can't change others' rules. Hopefully other states that had this rule will use me as an example to change that rule.
So that's how they salvaged it? It was essentially your doctor speaking to the commission and convincing them that there's no risks involved?
Yes.
Wow.
Between that and the Dana White's lawyer, they had all kind of resolved the whole and reversed their decision on not letting me fight.
Safe to say you're not going to jump at the next opportunity to fight in New York after all of this?
I don't know. I love New York. It was fun. The people were really good. The commission's a little crazy, but hopefully, like, I fixed the problem. There won't be any issues there anymore.
You're a pioneer. Not a lot of people can say they actually changed a rule. Like there's Will Chamberlain in basketball. He changed some rules. In MMA, maybe you changed a rule for everyone involved. And this kind of thing, I mean, this is a crazy thing to go through, especially in your debut. Had you gone to Buffalo, made the weight again, cut weight, all that stuff, and then flew home without a fight, without getting the release, without getting the moment, how do you think you would have dealt with that? Like mentally, internally, that must have, I mean, I can't even imagine how that would have felt.
Yeah, it was tough. It was tough to sit there and kind of in that moment think about, because I have been waiting to fight in the UFC for a long time, and been hoping and dreaming to be on that stage and in that octagon. And so sitting there, I was like, is it my dream never going to happen? Is this what this is telling me? You know, I was going through those emotions. And then I would say about 10 minutes afterwards, I looked over at my head coach. Him and I are very close. I live with him and his family, his wife, while I'm in training camp. So I'm so close to him, and he's in tears, crying his eyes out because we weren't fighting. I mean, that's how emotional this was. So I just kind of took a few minutes to deal with it. And then I looked over at him and I was like, there's no way this is happening. We've worked way too hard. We're fighting. Just let's stay positive. Let's stay focused. They're going to fix this. Let's just wait it out and see what happens. And so from that point on, I had made the decision that I would be fighting, and I kind of left it at that. I went to my room and tried not to think about it in a negative way, and knew that somehow, some way they were going to make the fight happen.
All this, as crazy as it was, pales in comparison to what you've been through as a human being growing up. I mean, you come from a pretty tough place in Chicago, and you still have family that lives there. You, correct me if I'm wrong, I read a great story on you in the Chicago Tribune, which was pretty cool to see them write a story on someone who wasn't in the UFC at the time last year. You were actually involved in, you know, some crime growing up, right? I mean, you were hanging out with the wrong people, right?
Yes, I come from a tough neighborhood in Chicago. I was exposed in the beginning of my life to drug addiction, to, you know, gangs, violence, dysfunction, complete dysfunction. My parents were actually homeless when I was a baby and young. And so, yeah, I was exposed to a lot of that. And most of my life, that's all I knew was that environment was gangbanging. I was gangbanging, unfortunately, at 12 years old. And that was the only lifestyle I had knew. And so at 18, I got into some trouble with the police and the law. And that was probably the lowest point in my life, I think, for me, because I had so much ambition. I knew that I was meant to do something great. I didn't know what at that time, but I felt like I was a complete failure. And so it was a very low spot, but that low place actually brought me back to the gym, brought me back to MMA. I was enrolled in MMA at 11 years old. And I started competing at 11, and I had left it to hang out and be on the streets and act a fool. And that place in my life was what I needed, unfortunately, to go through to be where I am today. And so being there, I was very low and had to fight my way out of a big hole I dug myself into. And so that's kind of what I've been doing is ever since then, is just changing my life. And I've literally gone back and reprogrammed my brain and how I think, what I was taught, and have come this far. So wow. Yeah, it is. It's a a long journey I've been on.
Yeah. Nothing certainly has come easy. Did you actually spend time in jail?
Yes, I did 9 days
Oh, my
in Cook
Lord.
County, and it was the worst 9 days of my life. Like, I cried every second I was in there. I was begging the Lord and everyone. The women in there were like, we can't be near you. All you do is cry and make us cry. And I'm like, I don't belong here. I was like calling my dad every day, multiple times, crying my eyes out to my dad, get me out of here. And like, my bond was no joke, man. My bond was like $20,000 to get me out.
What did you do?
And so at this time, my ex-husband, I was married to a drug addict.
Okay.
Go figure, a heroin addict at that. I was never addicted to drugs, but unfortunately, this was the kind of people that I allowed myself to be around. But he robbed someone, and I was with him. And when he got caught, I was with him. We were fighting and arguing about the whole situation. I was so upset about it that he was doing it. Couldn't stop him. And when the police came, they wanted me to tell on him, and I wouldn't. I was that ride or die girl at that time, and you can't snitch. No snitches in the hood. Snitches get stitches is right. What, I grew up knowing. And so I did not tell on him. And for that, I was charged myself.
Oh, no.
As an accomplice to his crime. And so, yes. And so because of that, and even going through that whole process, it wasn't enough to kind of even tell while we were going through court. It was a year-long court system that we had to go through. And even through all of that, I still would not tell on this man. And so we were divorced very shortly after. And I realized today how big of a mistake I had made and paid for it. I have paid for it. But again, I needed to go through that, unfortunately, to be where I am today, to be the woman I am today.
You mentioned that your parents were homeless when you were younger. So did you live on the streets as well?
Yes.
Wow.
My parents were both addicted to drugs. Like I said, I come from a very dysfunctional family, and most of them are addicted to drugs, unfortunately, and in some sort of craziness. And so, yeah, we were homeless. My mom was living in a Salvation Army and in a shelter until we got a place in Madison. And then when we were in Madison very young, we were kind of back and forth. And then at one point, the state came and took us away from my mom. And so we had to move back with my grandma back in Chicago. And from there, me and my two sisters at the time were split up and kind of went to individual family members. And so at the age of 9, my father ended up getting his life together and raised me from then on as a single parent.
Oh, wow. And do you still keep in contact with your parents?
Yes, my mom is clean now. She's been clean for many years. She's got a master's degree. She's doing amazing. Wow. Yes. It's such a great story. She's such an inspiration in my life. She bears a lot of guilt for her mistakes in the past. But to be honest, if I didn't have my mom the way she was growing up my whole life, I would not have an example of true perseverance. And so I'm very blessed for the stuff I went through in my life. My father, I'm still close to. He's doing well. So yeah, they're good now.
Masters in what?
She has a master's in telecommunications, I believe.
Wow, that is unbelievable. And did you not sort of adopt your younger sister, at least one of them, when you were younger? How old were you and how old was she?
My sister was 15 years old.
Okay.
She had just dropped out of high school. She was getting into trouble, getting into drugs, gang banging, and grandma kind of had enough. She was in and out of we were in group homes also as kids, but she was in and out of the group home, got kicked out of the group home. And so my grandma was couldn't do much anymore for her. And so I was 18, just turned 18. I had already moved out at 17. So I had been out of the house for a few months. So I took my sister in. I knew how important it was to graduate high school. I knew how important it was to get that education. And I could not allow my sister to just not do that. And so I brought her into I got us a place. I worked hard, worked 3 jobs. Full-time and 2 part-times to pay the rent and get us by. And I got my sister through high school.
Wow. What were your jobs?
I was a vet tech at that time, veterinary assistant. I also did alcohol promotions.
Wow. And is your grandmother still around?
Yes, grandma's still around.
Wow. So you making it to the UFC and just being in that cage meant a lot more than just, someone making it to the UFC. I mean, that was quite symbolic of everything that you've been through. Did I know you said your family is a little bit, all over the place and dealing with a lot of stuff, but did this kind of rally them together? Do you know that they kind of, got together, watched you, supported you? This is the kind of thing that can inspire others, especially when a family member is able to, achieve, a dream like that and make it to the pinnacle of their sport. Did that happen with you?
Yes, my family is so supportive. They do. They live vicariously through me. I loved to fight growing up. I was always fighting in the streets. I loved to fight. It did not come to a surprise to them when I wanted to be a professional fighter. And today I have 11 nieces that cousins. I have one niece, but I consider them my nieces. I have 11 of them still in that same neighborhood, still in that same environment that I grew up in. And to me, this is why I'm here today. This is my purpose, to sacrifice what I do for this sport, is to show them that it does not matter where you come from. It doesn't matter your mistake of yesterday, because today's a new day. It doesn't have to define you. And as long as you just work hard and you dedicate yourself and you educate yourself, you can be anything you want to be. And so it's the response that I get from my nieces is really heartwarming. And I get a lot of messages on my social media from younger kids. I go talk to the kids at my high school. I try to go at least once a year and speak with them and really, for my community, be that example for them, because it doesn't matter where you come from. You just have to work hard and believe in yourself, and you can be anything you want to be. And
where's home now for you?
So I'm back and forth between Chicago and San Diego. I do all my training camps and fight camps in Chicago. I'll actually be moving back there full time, but my husband is active duty Navy. We are stationed in San Diego right now. So I train here while I'm not in fight camp. And then we're actually in transition to Virginia.
Okay. So that's going to be your home.
Yes.
Wow. And this is a new husband.
Yes,
okay.
New husband.
Well, that is good. Everything.
Yes.
Hopefully, just making sure the other guy didn't resurface, if you will. Do you know? I know it's been relatively short amount of time since your debut, but I have to ask: do you know when your next fight will be yet?
I don't know yet. I hope it's soon. I don't want to not fight, and I want to stay active. I want to get back in there and prove myself. I didn't get that opportunity to really showcase my skills a couple weeks ago. And so I want to show the world my skills. I've worked very hard on my skill set, and unfortunately I wasn't able to show them. So I want to get back in there and not only prove to other people, but more importantly, prove to myself that I belong in that octagon with those girls. Do
you have a preference in opponent?
No.
All right.
No, I'm just ready to get in there.
All right. Well, great to have you on, Pearl. Really, so much respect for you. What an amazing story, everything you've overcome, and the kind of role model that you are for not just your family, but, people in general, young women in general, people who have made mistakes in their past. Really impressive. And I didn't know much about it when I was talking to you at the press conference that day. I was just so impressed with how you were handling this ludicrous situation with such poise and with grace and class. I mean, it was really a sight to see, especially for someone making their debut. So much respect to you. Kudos on how you handled everything. And I'm looking forward to your next fight, number 2 in the UFC, and hopefully it'll be a little less turbulent getting to the fight, and you can just focus on the task at hand and actually perform at the best of your capabilities. But great to have you on. All the best to you, and congrats on all your success.
Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
It's a dream come true, so thank you.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that very much. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay, thank you.
All right, there she is, Pearl Gonzalez, coming off her first fight in the UFC. Obviously did not go her way, but as we just learned, she has been through a lot in her life, and kind of gives you an insight as to how she was able to handle all of that craziness. Crazy thing for a young fighter, especially making their debut, to deal with. I thought handled it very impressively, and looking forward. They're very high on her. They've had her on Sean Shelby, that is the UFC's matchmaker for the 115-pound division, on his radar for quite some time. So let's see what she does in her second UFC fight.